Greetings, gentlemen and ladies, I'm the Crypto Game Snob, and in today's video we are taking a look at a special little deck that I have come up with. And if you think this board looks pretty good, pretty favorable, well, you're right. Let's jump into it and we'll take a look at how this deck works. Okay, so I've been kind of tweaking it a little bit here and there. It's not entirely perfectly finished yet, but as you can see we have a decent little win ratio, and this deck's actually fun to play. People do not expect you to be playing this deck. We're going to jump into some games here in just a minute. This deck can get absolutely absurdly, ridiculously fun. All right, so first off, let's talk about the essential heart and core of this deck. That includes the Guardian Simulacrum, and it also includes this very infrequently seen Trial of the False Reflection. Trial of the False Reflection is a Trial of the Gods set card. Summon a copy of a target creature, and the copy has, at the start of your turn, summon a copy of this creature. So basically what that means is to first use this to copy a card. For example, let's say Guardian Simulacrum, right? So on your very same turn, you cast that Trial of False Reflection. Now you have two Guardians. All right, your second Guardian includes the copy has, at the start of your turn, summon a copy of this creature, which basically means that on your next turn, when your opponent passes his turn and it's back to you, your copied creature will now summon a copy of itself. Okay, and on your next turn after that, both of your copied creatures will now summon copies of themselves. So each copy gets a copy that starts summoning more copies at the start of every single turn. This is ridiculous. If you can get this on your board, this is ridiculous. And this is especially even more ridiculous when paired together with Guardian Simulacrum. Why? Why is this ridiculous Guardian Simulacrum? Well, check out Guardian Simulacrum. It comes with Spell Boost 1, right? And at the end of your turn, at the end of each turn, set this creature's armor equal to your total spell boost. Right, so what happens? At the end of your turn, you get, say you have one of these on your board. It comes out with armor 1, so fairly difficult to take out, 4/6 with 1 armor, fairly difficult to clear right away. Your next turn, when you have 2 of these, now you have you have 4/6 with armor 2, right? Say you managed to get 4 of these on the board. Now these all have armor 4. Right, so for every point of spell boost, these get an additional point of armor that is upgraded at the end of each turn. Meanwhile, they're cloning themselves and just getting stronger and stronger every turn. Now, we're going to jump into some games, and you're going to see exactly how this goes. But I have played this deck now up against some Nature, some Deception, some Control Light, some of the popular Meta Light, Magic, and even War, and it's actually been able to defeat all of these, not every single time, and I'm still refining, of course, so this is a bit of a work in progress. Let's look at some of the other cards, and then we'll get into some games. So Portable Fortress is awesome. This is kind of a Pyramid Warden, really. You know, you got that 1/6 instead of 2/6. You still have 6 points of frontline health, and you don't have the downside of your enemy summoning a creature after it dies. Speaking of Pyramid Warden, we also have some Pyramid Wardens. Now you could swap these out for potentially, I don't know, you could swap these out for something else. You could swap these out for maybe like a Bronze Gate or something like that, right, if you don't have Pyramid Wardens. But the point is to get quite a decent amount of early game frontline and also early game defense. Because a lot of what we're going to face up against is aggressive nature, aggressive war. Right, so we need some way to stave off that early game, and better than stave it off, we need some way to nullify it. So Time Bomb is also a great addition to this deck. This is a good card for making a trade. 3/2, it can trade into something, and then if there's something else on the board, it will also take that out as well. So this can be a great way to make favorable trades. Lightning Talisman is also a super defensive item. You can use this, you can use Mage Bolt on yourself and trigger this effect on yourself, or whenever your opponent attacks you, it deals 2 damage to the strongest enemy and then 1 damage to the weakest enemy. So basically it's dealing 3 points of reflective damage every time it gets hit. So that's up to 9 points of reflective damage. This is just so good for dealing with that early game aggression where you're dealing with a lot of weaker creatures typically. This stops them in their tracks. It's really, really good. We have the Rune Moth. This is really, really good as well. If you can get Rune Moth on the board and you can get some runes of strength or runes of fire or runes of strength in particular, and then drop down a rune of strength on your Guardian Simulacrum for 0 mana when that comes up, that can be extremely powerful. It can make it even more sticky. You can also give it a front line, so now everything has to go through it to even get to you. So the Rune Moth is there to generate extra cards. It's just a great card. Rune Moth is a great card. It generates value. It's a great card. We also have Equivalent Exchange. Now this is an interesting one because what this does is you obliterate some of your early game hand, but our goal is to survive the early game so that we can get out our Labyrinth Guard, our Guardian Simulacrum, our Trial of the False Reflection. We want to get to about 7 mana. So if we have to give up some of our early game cards to skip ahead 2 turns, that Equivalent Exchange actually gets us there nicely. You can pip into this on turn 2, pick out 2 of your cards, obliterate them, and then you still have a lot of defensive options for surviving to mana 6, etc. Palace is nice. This is a swappable card. It didn't come up a lot when I played it, but when it does come up, if you can keep Palace on the board and get a couple extra spells out of him, that's awesome. We also have the Phased Touch Golem. Now this is really nice because it has a great synergy with, for example, Time Bomb. Time Bomb gets warded at the end of each turn. Portable Fortress also gets warded at the end of each turn. So this is just a decent little 3/3 warded creature that can make favorable trades, and it can also keep your creatures warded. I also had Archimedes' Mirror in here for a while. I might put it back in. I'm just testing actually a little bit of Covetous Cutthroat, but I had Archimedes' Mirror, which is also an Atlantean, because this buffs any Atlantean with ward. So there was a lot of nice synergies that came out of this phase touched. Golem Shaped Blast is great. Also, this can help you to recover boards that just get too wide too fast. Early aggro war boards, early aggro nature boards. This can help get you back in the game. Shape Blast, and since there's so much frontline in this deck, you can oftentimes choose to just hit everything without frontline and go right behind, take out all their cards, keep your frontline in place. So yeah, Shape Blast is great. Storm Stress is also really great. It was buffed to a 3/6 with frontline that also has a roar to deal 1 damage to each enemy creature. So this is like a minor AoE plus frontline at only 5 mana. So this will help to get you there. This will help to get you up to where you want to be. Guardian Simulacrum and also Labyrinth Guard, just because this is a massive wall. Do not use Trial of the Reflection, False Reflection on Labyrinth Guard, because he cannot attack, and you will end up with a board full of Labyrinth Guards that cannot attack, and you won't be able to get rid of them, and it could be very bad. I would only use Trial of the False Reflection on Labyrinth Guard if I had absolutely no other choice. But yeah, that is not the card to Trial of the False Reflection up on. Covetous Cutthroat, I have 2 cards in this deck that I'm kind of swapping around and messing around with and trying to decide what I want for those last 2 cards. I'm just playing around with this one right now because theoretically this is nice because it potentially can buff itself up every single turn, plus X, where X is equal to the durability of your opponent's relic. So if you're playing against, say, for example, a zombie relic, Necroceptor, this gets +1/+1 every turn that it survives, and since it's behind so much other frontline, it may survive for a while, so I'm playing around with that. Speaking of frontline, we have Guild Enforcer also at mana 5. And then last but not least, Demogorgon. Demogorgon is, without a question, just an awesome card, and that is because this card can turn games around. If you get to 6-7 mana, you're a little bit behind, you're low on health, as sometimes is the case. You drop your Demogorgon, you put your opponent to sleep, you get some healing. The next turn, you probably get some more healing. Theoretically, you could maybe drop some of your Rune Moss, Rune of Strength now on your Demogorgon and turn him into a 6/8, and now you're healing for 6 every time you hit. Or you could also even potentially Trial the False Reflection on your Demogorgon and just get like a board full of Demogorgons. So that's a glimpse at how this deck works. Let's jump into some games. All right. Okay, kicking things off with Equivalent Exchange in hand. That's not a bad thing to see in hand. You want to play that earlier than later typically. It's okay to sacrifice a few early game cards to get that big advantage for some later game cards, or so I have found so far. This version doesn't have the Covetous Cutthroat. This has the Theban Brawler instead. So like I say, I've been kind of swapping cards in and out, a few cards in and out from the base framework that we went over just a moment ago. All right, let's get into it. We are going up against a zombie death deck. Oh yeah, actually this is a bit of an earlier version because I had the Scepter of Artistry in this version. Now Scepter of Artistry is kind of interesting in that it could potentially buff up your Guardian Simulacrum once they come down, but I found it was never really coming up at the right time when I needed it. So it was just very circumstantial. And more often than not, it was a dead card in hand, so I eventually swapped that out. And that is kind of the fun and interesting thing about playtesting different decks, is you never really know how it's going to unfold, what you're going to need, what you never use, until you start playing with the deck. And then it's like, oh yeah, that just never came up, or almost never came up, and you can swap out dead cards, of course, and get in something that you need. I find that these games do tend to go to 7 mana quite easily. 7 mana for me anyways, because I'm 2 mana ahead. 8 mana is often seen as well, so I'm kind of actually considering some potential 8 mana cards as some options. But actually, the layout that you saw, the configuration that you saw, is working pretty good. So I haven't adjusted things around too much. Kind of working with the principle that if it ain't broke, don't fix it type thing. And as you can see, we're already quite high up there in mana. Next turn, we can drop down the Guardian Simulacrum thanks to equivalent exchange. We have a ton of counters on the board. Theban Brawlers, that good front line. The Portable Fortress is also a great front line. We also have the Time Bomb, which will take out something and then do 2 damage to something else, probably. And we do still get that afterlife effect, so we're able to take out a zombie. Not the best trade there, but what we're doing in the early game is just buying time. We're not really trying to get ahead in the early game. We're buying time until we can get somewhere. Now, that Guardian Simulacrum behind a Portable Fortress is very nice. Unfortunately, in hand at the moment, I do not have Trail of the False Reflection, but even without that, Guardian Simulacrum is quite a good card with that 4 points of damage and 1 armor, 6 health. It's a very decent card. It's quite difficult to take out. Your opponent has to make an absolutely concentrated effort to be able to take out the Guardian Simulacrum. There's another equivalent exchange. Now, in case you don't have cards in hand, equivalent exchange can also draw 2 cards. So what you can actually do, if you're very low on cards like I am right here, is drop down the cards and play this with no cards. Now it's just worth 2 free cards, or 2 unlocked mana locks. So in this case, I opted on the two cards, actually 2 fantastic cards, 2 perfect cards for what I need here. Trial of the False Reflection, and well, Demogorgon never hurts and actually swings games. I've seen this card kind of come down in popularity and price lately, from like $2,000 down to around 900 and 1,000. Yeah, I think people have maybe forgotten just how good this card, just how powerful this card is, because there's a lot of other really good cards also in the meta, but Demogorgon is just absolutely amazing. You heal, you delay, you take out your opponent's creatures. It's such a powerful control card and healing card. So yeah, at this point we have a fully healed Guardian Simulacrum, and now Trial of the False Reflection will clone your card in its current state, not from its original source state, but in its current state. So if I was to drop down a Rune of Strength on my Guardian Simulacrum and then clone that, the clone would also have the Rune of Strength buffs. Now I don't have enough mana for that. That's where the Rune Moth comes in handy, because you can drop down a 0 mana Rune of Strength sometimes and then clone that, which would be really good, obviously. But you can see that the Trial of the False Reflection is in place. Now, if somebody plays this against you, now, unless you're playing against me, because it's better if people don't know this, but if somebody plays this against you, take out the reflection first. That's the one with the little yellow border around it. That's the one that's going to start cloning itself. The other one, the original source, won't create clones. It's only the copy that creates clones. So if you have to deal with this, take out the clone. That needs to be your absolutely prioritized focus. So here we have our secondary Simulacrum, and now we've got 3 of them with 3 spell boost on board. And at the end of this turn, all of their armor is going to buff up to 3/3. Demogorgon, like I say, such a powerful card, puts everything to sleep, will do damage to something. In this case, I totally made a mistake and threw the Demogorgon down and put my own creatures to sleep before I attacked with them, which was a total bonehead move, but it happened. It happened, it happens sometimes. Oh yeah. Void Flash, certainly, is one way to deal with one of the clones, but we've already got 2 clones on the board to deal with. That's a lot of clone. I mean, that's a lot to have to take down. Now, especially when you don't have creatures to do it with, right? So, if you do damage to the clone, the damage will also be cloned every single time. So that is, you know, if you have to face up against this deck, against a Trial of False Reflection, doing damage to the clone will weaken the clone each time. It basically just clones whatever the card is. So you can at least work away at it and potentially get some traction back, but once this starts to go off, honestly, it can be very, very difficult to get any sort of traction back. As you can see, we've now got 3 of them on board, and I'm going to actually apply Rune of Strength onto one of them. That will make him clone even stronger each time with Frontline. And at this point, yeah, things are just looking extremely good for me. Not so good for my opponent. And as you can see, this time we actually have 2 Guardian Simulacrum clones on the board. So that means next turn, both of them will actually create a clone. And then if the game was to go on any longer than that, the turn after that, they would all get buffed up to 5 armor because there would be 5 spell boost on the board. So you would have basically 5 with 5 armor. Yeah, that's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it takes a bit to set this board up, right? You have to get all the right pieces in the right place in the right time, and your opponent has to not be able to deal with that clone, which can sometimes be tricky because they're going to definitely do everything they can to take that clone out so it doesn't start replicating. But if you can get this set up, yeah, it can be pretty crazy. Oh yeah, ba-doop-boop-ba-doo. Anyway, we can fast. Well, okay, all right, here we go. I was going to say we can fast forward this game, but I think we're moving now. I think we're moving. We're almost at the end. I'm not exactly sure. I might have been getting slow played here, so, yeah, just to wear down that rope. I think that might have been what happened. Yeah. Anyway, as you can see, the front line cloned on those Guardians, and yeah, that's basically all she wrote. A good game. Let's jump into the next one. Alright, now in this next game, we are actually jumping in at mana 3. I didn't get to record the entire game. Shadow play ran a little bit short. But we are playing up against Meta Light, which is extremely powerful in the current state of things with the core refresh. In this variation, you can see we're actually using the aggravated, is it the aggravated architect? I think so. Aggravated architect, I forget what he's called. The idea here is that the Guardian Simulacrum is actually a structure, and so is the Labyrinth Guard, I think, yeah, Labyrinth Guard. He's also a structure, and both of them have 1 armor. So in theory, the aggravated architect does 4 does 4 damage, the creature's strength as damage, to a creature, I guess, and does 1 damage to the structure that gets targeted. But since the structure that gets targeted has 1 armor, I am assuming it would do 0 damage. Now that was the theory when I was testing this. I never got around to it because this card never really came up in the right progression, so I actually ended up removing it for that reason, just because, yeah, it never came up in the right progression. So yeah. But in theory, I think there was an interesting theory there to be tested with the aggravated architect. I might try it again back in the deck. We'll see. We'll see. It is a nice 2 mana 2/4 with ward and backline. Right now, you just need a structure. You need a structure for it to do anything at all. But it does concern your opponent, oftentimes, and they will want to deal with it since it's backline and warded, whilst they have a chance to do so. And so it can be a good little distraction, if nothing else. I can't remember exactly. Oh, I think I was working out the details for how to take out that Chalice Priest. and his other cards. So I can do damage to myself with Mage Bolt, of course, and that will do 2 damage to the strongest creature and then 1 damage to the weakest creature. And I was just trying to work out if there was a way to get to that Chalice Priest. I think I eventually decided that there wasn't. There wasn't really a good way, so yep, that's where we got to. And there's that Battle Cleric, which summons an Acolyte every turn. So also something that you need to get rid of, or the board is going to get very wide, very fast. Shaped Blast, so nice, like I was saying before. Shaped Blast, so nice, just for not damaging frontline, so much frontline in this deck. I'm trying to decide. I didn't want to kill my Moth, but I do want to drop that Shaped Blast to be able to kind of get to all that backline. And decide that the Rune of Strength will actually keep the Moth alive and actually make it a frontline, so no damage. That was a pretty handy use of the Rune Moth's Rune of Strength. Yeah, actually, I really love the Rune Moth now. It's one of my new favorite cards that I've been using all the time. If you can get it to stick for a while, it gives you so much value. And then you're either healing, or you're frontlining, or you're doing damage with the what is it? Rain of Fire? Fire something? I forget what that Rune of Fire? Yeah, Rune of Fire. I think that's what it is.
The possibilities are endless.
And additionally, the little Rune Moth, he can even attack. Sometimes these value generators, like Palace, for example, they can attack. But Rune Moth, he can attack. Well, that's pretty cool. There's that free bonus healing from Rune Moth. Rune Moth, I really love that Rune Moth. And that's actually one of the things I like to do, is just Mage Bolt on myself. That does 2 damage, like I say, to the strong creature, 1 damage to the weak creature. You can't swing with your relic, but you can hit yourself with it. And so that's just a good way to clear little problems off the board. And here we are building up a considerable board against Light, which is known for its board building. We're actually ahead of the race here with our board building, which is interesting for Magic, since this deck contains a very minimal supply of actual spells, and it's mostly creatures. We have a couple of big spells. We have our Shaped Blast and our Trial of False Reflection, but otherwise, yeah, we got our runes, and otherwise mostly just creatures. Oh, and Equivalent Exchange, I guess, is a spell too. But not much in the way of damage spells, I guess I should say. Not direct damage. Damage clearing spell, or creature clearing spells. But this game is actually a good example of this deck in play, even when you don't get your sort of your best case scenario, right? When you don't get your Trial of False Reflection, when you don't get your Guardian Simulacrum to put that trial on. This is a good example of this deck actually holding its own and having some other ways to get the job done, right? Like that Rune Moth, etc. And here is where, of course, Demogorgon is just so good. Just so good. Since his board is entirely full at this point, he can't play any other cards or creature cards to buff up those creatures, give them, which means that, yeah, we kind of get a free turn out of this. Well, that's exactly what it means, basically. Whatever he's got for spells, other than that, yeah, kind of a free turn. Thanks to the almighty Demogorgon. That is actually a card that, in this particular deck, Demogorgon is very good. Very good. Many times I've used it to save me from not being able to, basically from very early aggressive war decks or early aggressive nature decks that do manage to get quite a bit of damage through. I'm just kind of doing everything I can to, hold back some of that damage and deal with the creatures, and in the meantime taking quite a bit of damage. And so by the time we get to Demogorgon, or Mana 7, that healing comes in so handy, especially against Slayer War, who just likes to kind of get through your front line, get through everything, and just do 2 damage. And since you're already pretty bursted at that point, yeah, that 2 damage adds up pretty quick. But Demogorgon turns things around. Not to mention the Rune Moth with its heals as well. That can also be very good. Just some nice options for magic to heal. Thanks to Rune Moth, thanks to Demogorgon, some nice healing options. Here I am entirely locked down without any options. And I'm thinking just to do what damage I can to his face. But then I'm thinking I might want to save my burst damage to kind of take him by surprise. Because who knows what else he might have up his sleeve. I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, I'm just basically removing all the face damage and getting that into my hand. Actually, I'm counting up my cards here, and I have too many cards in hand. So basically, this turn actually ends up just being a pass because I can't play anything. I'm all locked up, and yeah, Mage Bolt to the face. That's it. The thing is now with Rune of Fire ×2 for 0 mana, we also have the 2 damage spell in the, or sorry, it's a 1 damage God Face damage spell, I forget what it's called, in the Sanctum, so that gives us 7 plus 1 from a Mage Bolt, which means we only need 1 point of damage left on the board after all is said and done, unless he gets some healing. Which he does. He does get some healing. And some more healing. But with so many creatures left on the board, which he did not take out, that's about all she wrote. Alright, let's move on to another game. Alright, this time we're facing up against some nature. And I have played this deck against all the gods, and it has actually performed well against all the gods. You know, it's not a perfect win ratio or anything like that, but it holds its own surprisingly well against even some of the better meta decks, like the better meta light, the Viking aggro war. It holds its own. It holds its own quite well for kind of a random crazy idea that I was thinking of. It actually holds its own pretty well. So here the goal is to kill the jag without bringing any creatures back from his board. I'm hoping he'll swing into my Warden, which he does, which means that next turn I can actually just hit the jag and take out his jag and my Warden, and no cards are put back on the board, and now we get a bit of a momentum shift for going second. Basically, going first gives you a lot of early game momentum if you have the right cards. If you get skunked, well, less good. But going second and having the momentum and having some pips in your bag, that's a good place to be in. Unfortunately, we totally brick here on mana 3. Just a little Mage Bolt to the face. Alright. And there we see Covetous Cutthroat down, finally in hand. Haven't actually played the card yet. Added it a few games ago. Haven't played it. I feel like it could be very good in certain circumstances. So, yeah, I'm still experimenting with it. Double Demo in hand is looking very, very helpful. Should we happen to make our way to 7 mana, Double Demo, basically one of the best plays you can make. Sleep everything with your first demo, do some damage, take out a creature, heal up, whatever. Second demo comes down, sleeps everything again, and then both demos do their damage to sleeping creatures and heal you up again. Yeah, double demo is pretty crazy. And Covetous Cutthroat. Now the nice thing about having some cards which are not frontline, and you've noticed that a lot of cards in this deck are indeed frontline. The nice thing about having something not frontline is that you have something to hide behind basically until you can get your Trial of the False Reflection off, which is sometimes good, or something, or you know, basically if you're false reflectioning your front line, your opponent will definitely be able to make attacks on it. But if you've got that on a back or something behind the front line, it's, you know, that much more difficult to keep alive for that all important one turn that you need to keep it alive so that it can start cloning itself and spiral out of control. Now I should have grabbed that Rune of Strength in the Sanctum, but I missed it before I clicked over. But oops, I call that a mistake. And here, Shaped Blast is looking very nice. I was thinking about just ramming into the face for some damage. 4 damage is a nice amount, but on the other hand, taking out the entire board is also kind of good, so I changed my mind and I go after the tree. The tree would have otherwise survived the Shaped Blast. At this point, though we have nothing on the table, we have so much in our hand that, yep, the future is looking very bright, very optimistic. And that Rune of Strength to enforce the Pyramid Warden. Could have also dropped that also on the Atlantean Phase Golem. That's right. Get a double frontline as an option. And in retrospect, that might have been the better option because the big ol' pangolin comes down. And he's able to trade out the Pyramid Warden. And unfortunately, the problem with having a lot of little critters in your void is that you get little critters back, oftentimes. So I'm hoping now that the Guardian Simulacrum will basically get missed. 50-50 from the pangolin. If it does, I can start cloning it, and all will be happy and well. I could drop down a Demogorgon, delay things a turn, etc., etc. Jump on is very scary. Jump on is very big. You can also, by the way, clone your opponent's creatures and take them over onto your side of the board. So if your opponent drops something massive, you can clone it and make it yours. So, you know, if you get into the late game, for example, and your opponent drops down an Echophon, you can clone that Echophon, and your Echophon will make infinite clones. So even though this deck doesn't have like anything above 7 mana, if you do get into the end game, you still have some options. And deciding to Demogorgon here, since it is possible for him to take out the cloned creature with his pangolin, and if that happens, well, then I'm kind of getting behind a bit. But the Demogorgon actually hits the pangolin, which was the best case scenario there. And yeah, basically what you want to do is set up the board so that he doesn't have enough creatures, ideally, to take down your clone, to take down your Trial of the False Reflection target. If you can keep it alive for one turn, that's usually all it takes. And here that double Demogorgon in hand. Kind of ridiculous. Everything on the board is the perfect amount of health, 3 health. The Guardian Simulacrum will not take any burn damage because it doesn't take any damage at all. Has to take damage in order for that burn to apply. And yeah, now things just start to get silly with the double demos. Heal, heal, heal. Take out all the sleeping creatures. The Hunt is unfortunately not powerful enough to deal with as much health as on the board, especially with some armor. Now here, normally I might want to keep my Demogorgon alive, but like I was saying before, the goal is to keep the goal is to protect your clone. So taking creatures off the board that could endanger that clone or give him just enough damage to deal with that clone, that false reflection, is kind of what I generally try to do. I thought he might quit here. Kudos for not quitting, and by the way. Just because, yeah, if you can't deal with that clone right away, things just start getting really, really silly. There's another Guardian Simulacrum in my hand, so now we've got 4 on board. The next turn they all get buffed up to 4 points of armor, and things just start getting extremely silly. Sudden Bloom is an awesome card. Unfortunately, for just how much firepower is on my side of the board, it is not enough. Typically, Sudden Bloom, you know, drops down, clears board, but in this case, we have so much armor. It's just, yeah, it's just not happening. I love Sudden Bloom, though. Sudden Bloom's a fantastic card. It is one of the cards I actually made a point to buy in Diamond, just because I like it so much. Alright, that's it. Good game. Alright, here we are now going up against a Deception deck. I think this is a guild sort of prisoner escapee deception deck. Quite good, quite effective. I played it before, pretty fun. There we see equivalent exchange early on, which is always very nice to be able to bump up to a higher amount of mana pretty quick. A little Bomb Boy on the board. This is not a great trade for Bomb Boy, but Magic is generally well suited to protect its early game health, so that when it comes to some of the later game plays, like in Mana 6, when you start becoming offensive, you don't want to be on your last legs typically. So I try to protect my early game health as much as I can. Here I'm kind of torn. I really like Stormstress for Mana 5. I really like Equivalent Exchange, but I don't want to get rid of Stormstress. I don't want to get rid of Rune Moth. I don't want to get rid of Trial of False Reflection. I decided just to throw down Rune Moth. That will give me 1 free rune, at least, and he now needs to spend that turn, spend his what's a guild Vault Vagabond. He needs to spend that on killing the Rune Moth, probably, in order for me to not get more and more runes, and that also stops him from copying cards, which was kind of the goal behind there. I do at least get 1 rune out of it and delay things a little bit. Not the best, but also not the worst. And it can be very hard sometimes, and that's also a great thing about Rune Moth, is that those free runes can be sacrificed to the Equivalent Exchange. So that's some great value generation you can get out of that, and not have to throw away some of your really key important cards. But it can hurt a lot to have to sacrifice cards for those extra 2 points of mana. But getting ahead to the Guardian Simulacrum earlier, getting ahead to Trial earlier by just those 2 points of mana, I find makes a big difference. Changing of Locks is great because that gives him another prisoner escapee, and actually things are starting to look really bad. At this point, the board is starting to spiral out of control in his favor. But that is why we have spells like Shaped Blast, which I am very lucky to top deck in this case. Comes up just when needed.
patience is a virtue.
and takes out basically all my problems. Sorry, not shaped blast. I keep calling it shaped blast. It's curved blast. Or is it shaped blast? I don't know. Or maybe one of them is called curved and the other is called something else. I didn't notice that detail. Like the one that does frontline maybe has a different name. I'm not too sure. I'm gonna have to take a look at that.
This looks promising.
There's that Guardian Simulacrum, Portable Fortress, all sorts of good stuff on the board. In retrospect, I think I might have first played my Portable Fortress, but I was thinking he would probably ignore my Simulacrum and just go straight through to face. That's kind of what I was thinking. And, well, just because he doesn't get much value in attacking my Simulacrum, and he is protected with frontline, so I was thinking he would just swing face. And then, actually here, I could actually clone his Guild Enforcer. I could also clone my Simulacrum. I could do a couple of things. So like I say, we need to make sure that that first move is protected. We need to protect our clone initially. Luckily here I also top deck a very nice card. Portable Fortress gets down some double frontline. You'll also notice I'm not attacking with my Simulacrum. That is because I want to have it at full strength for when I clone it. So that's something to keep in mind. If your Simulacrum is weaker, it will clone weaker. So it can be a little bit tricky, right? To get that false reflection down when your opponent has a decent board and you know they're going to be gunning for it when the time comes. That's why this deck has a lot of frontline, not only to survive the early game, but to also have something in the way whilst buying just enough time to grab that false reflection target. Like I say, if your opponent has a decent board, you can just clone with something on their side of the board. And if you have even like a little bit of frontline, that could be a great way to do it. That way you don't have to spend 2 turns on false reflection getting your creature down and then your clone target and then your clone spell, but you can just clone something instantly. So that's just something that you can tactically use when the circumstance is available. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I'm running out of narration energy. Alright, here we go. So yeah, here we're just looking at such a big board of creatures. It is actually going to be very possible for him to take out my false reflection, I guess, is what I'm looking for. I think I need a cup of coffee. It's not ideal. It's certainly far from ideal at this point. So sometimes, and this is why I was telling you guys before, sometimes your opponent doesn't know which target to go for. Right? Sometimes they'll go for the source target. If they do that, you can chuckle a little bit and thank them, because it can be a little confusing if you don't face this card, and that's one of the fun things about playing decks that people aren't used to playing against, and playing with cards that they're not really too sure what they do, right? So the better target there would have been to take out my my reflection, rather, so that it clones weaker. Even if you don't kill it, you can get it to clone weaker, right? Which is at least a step in the right direction. But it could be, I'm not sure, maybe that was just an oversight by my opponent, maybe he hadn't seen the card before, but that actually comes up quite a bit when you play this deck. You will encounter opponents that aren't used to playing against Trial of False Reflection. I've been actually seeing that happen for like more than a year now, playing False Reflection. People don't know what it does exactly and they go for the wrong card. So, yep. You know, I wasn't going to do this. I was going to end the video here, but I ended up playing a couple more fun games against War, which we haven't featured yet, which were pretty cool. So I'm going to do a couple more games. Let's go. And in this game, you can see that I have swapped out the Covetous Cutthroat, which I was talking about earlier as being my optional card, for the Amplification Machine. If you don't know what Amplification Machine does, it is a 0/7 3-mana card that generates a random creature with a Roar as an ability every single turn. So what you basically end up with is all sorts of potentially interesting things. And so actually I really like that. I like when I get random cards, and I like decks that generate random cards. It really spices things up, makes things very interesting. In addition to that, we also have Palace, which can generate random spells. We have the Rune Moth, which generates runes. All of these work really nicely in conjunction with Equivalent Exchange, which we need to sacrifice 2 cards to. So having all of these value generators also in place is a nice way to get that extra mana, and at the same time not, you know, wipe out our core deck basically. Typically, when I see 2 equivalent exchanges, I'll just wipe one of them. We're not ramping much higher than 7 mana in this game, so getting 2 equivalent exchanges is overkill. But as you can see, we got the Manosian Infiltrator there from the Roar, so now that's not a super great target to have. That makes a great target to exchange out and get some bonus mana. Otherwise, I would have had to lose my Rune Moth, which I love, or my Shaped Blast, which I have a feeling is going to come in very handy very soon, considering that my opponent is building up the board. The other nice thing about Amplification Machine is that it is a 0/7, and though it does not have frontline, you might as well almost assume that it does have frontline, because if your opponent decides to leave that on the board, they are just giving you free resources every single turn, and at the same time attacking it and taking it out doesn't damage their creatures back. So this Red Fume Serum, which is extremely nasty, would have gone straight to my face otherwise, but instead was deflected by the Amplification Machine. And that's kind of one of the ideas as well when it comes to the Rune Moth. Now, I am lucky to generate a Rune of Fire here. But the Rune Moth is also another one that players will basically treat as frontline. If they don't take it out, it's just going to generate so much value for your opponent. You have to take it out, so even though it's not frontline, it almost acts as frontline. It's like value generating frontline, so to speak. Quasi value generating frontline.
This looks promising.
And those 0 mana runes are so good, so powerful. We are actually able to use Shaped Blast here, and because the Rune of Fire is 0 mana, we're able to finish off that extremely threatening Deutera, or yeah, Deutera, that's who that was. Luckily here, my opponent didn't have too much more to throw down than a Card Shark, and there's that huge front line that we get to. Once we get to mana 6, we got some big front lines. We got Stormstress, we got Labyrinth Guardian. We just got some really good stuff to protect face once we get to 6 mana, and that's a part of the goal, of course, of this deck, is to get up there and then start cloning stuff. Now, I am super happy about this, and this is actually part of why I'm sharing this game, is because now he's created this beautiful 5/5 protected, not Deutera, her little sister, her big sister, I guess I should say, which is also the absolute perfect target for a Trial of False Reflection. It also comes down 5/5 with protected, and it's behind a Labyrinth Guard, so that's great. That works for me. So now in this case, our Deutera sister will continue to duplicate herself. He only has 1. Doesn't seem fair, but hey, this deck is kind of crazy. And yeah, it actually makes a great effort taking down that front line. But now we're just going to start duplicating cards. There's that Demogorgon, like I was telling you guys before. Demogorgon, just so strong around that 7 mana. If you had any sort of doubt about which way the game was going, and you see that Demogorgon come down, and you get your healing up, you sleep your opponent's board. Yeah, it's silly. It's such a good. It's no wonder that it's a $1,000 card. It's such a good card. And that's it. Alright, let's do another. Alright, we are kicking things off again here against a war. Like I say, we didn't have any war games, and now we have a couple of war games to show you guys. Equivalent Exchange in hand, Pyramid Warden. Now, I really like to protect face early on. if you start to allow damage to come through to face when you have a decent defense to it, it's really going to add up in the mid game. And War is going to start using their god power, and it's going to be really hard to come back from that. So I like to protect face, so instead of equivalent exchange here, I'm throwing down the Warden. And that is because, based on what I see on the board, anyway, he doesn't have a good option for dealing with that on the next turn, which gives me, a nice equivalent exchange opportunity. And Time Bomb, even though I really like Time Bomb, Phase Golem, even though I really like Phase Golem. And there's that other equivalent exchange, so I'm able to actually now trade out something like Time Bomb or Phase Golem. And yeah, get that mana unlocked. Not a major loss to lose Phase Golem or Time Bomb, both great cards. I love them both, but not a major loss. I was going to go for his face here and let him take out my Warden next turn, but decided just to control the board. Just because, just because, well, I can't even remember why. I just wanted to control the board. I was concerned he might have some buff for the creature or something like that, so I decided just to throw down some board control to control the board. How many guys control the board? That's what I'm saying here. Control the board. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that. I don't know. I should probably stop narrating now because I'm starting to get a little bit loopy after narrating for like an hour straight. Anyway. Oh yeah, all right. There's that amplification machine. Also perfect amount of mana to throw down the Time Bomb as well. And yeah, at 0-7 for 3 mana, that's a lot of health to have to get through. You really have to throw a lot of what you have at it in order to take it down, to stop it from creating more and more cards. Yeah, that's all there is to it. He decides to take out the Time Bomb just so that it cannot bomb anything else on the board, which is a good idea. And thank you to Equivalent Exchange, and as you can see, we have no cards in hand. We're playing off the top of our deck here, which is again why Amplification Machine is rather nice. Now we can start generating cards each turn. Not a great card to generate here. In fact, quite a bad card. I didn't really want to destroy my portable fortresses, but at the same time, I didn't want to leave my board entirely empty, and taking out your low mana cards is not the worst thing ever when you're getting into the later stages. Gives you a better chance of drawing something stronger. Even though I do really like those portable fortresses, they work at all stages of the game, actually. But hey, Demogorgon is in hand, a Pip is in the pocket, so the next turn is pretty much safe. It's pretty much safe. Got some healing. We'll draw another creature with our Amplification Machine. Yeah, all sorts of good stuff. And there's the double demo. Double demo is so ridiculous. And I draw basically the worst roar you can get, the Atraxia, or whatever that card is called. Avraxis? Not Atraxia. Avraxis. That's what it is. Avraxis. Yeah. And he's just not paying any attention to that Amplification Machine. Kind of ignored it early on, and yes, just going to continue to generate value. That's why I say, it acts kind of like a front line, and if your opponent ignores it, it just continues to give so much value. Now, I do actually really love to throw down Palace, but Palace and Mastermind actually would have been a fun combo. Here, I have just enough mana for it, but I mean, you just can't argue with double demo. I mean, it's a total board clear. It's healing me up. It's just everything you need in a bag of chips. It's crazy. Demogorgons are so powerful, and this deck in particular uses them so well. Actually, I'd never played Mastermind before, and that's why this deck gets so fun with something like Amplification Machine or Palace, because you start getting random cards that you might not have seen before, and it just kind of keeps things interesting and spicy. I actually had to look up what the Mind Probe card actually even did, because I've never played it before. By the way, it does 1 damage to your opponent's god for every 2 cards they have in hand, and you can continue to stack those up every time the Mastermind makes an attack. Kind of interesting. I mean, theoretically, you could use your amplification machine to generate a Demogorgon. Like, any creature with roar can come out of that amplification machine. It's a fun card. It's a super fun card. I think it is my final choice. And then we see Trial of the False Reflection. Isn't that nice? Trial of the False Reflection, and of course, amplification machine brings up Griffith the Chosen, which would actually be pretty cool if my opponent had a big board and I needed to deal with it, but at the moment I have the big board. So, does anybody like unlimited Demogorgons? I don't know, I sure do. Let's go there. Let's get more Demogorgons. You can never have too many. But yeah, as you guys can see, the potential to clone then things which continue to clone over and over and over again from your board or your opponent's board. I could have potentially cloned like the amplification machine if I wanted to, and then generated just like crazy cards every turn, right? Like, of course it would quickly fill up my board with amplification machines and it would have been a really bad idea, but you could do crazy stuff with Trial of the False Reflection. I give kudos to my opponent, by the way, Gauntlet Ghost, for not throwing in the towel at this point. I probably would have done so. But hey, he pulls out that Soul Survivor, which is part of what makes War so incredibly powerful. Soul Survivor, Red Fume Serum. War's got some crazy good cards. Luckily, I'm able to heal up entirely from those Demogorgons. And still got the amplification machine on the board. Sormstress comes down. And you just never know what you're going to get from that amplification machine. Oh, is it Aladdin, the Euclid Dragon? However you say that. I don't know. Am I 1 pip away from being able to drop him? Yeah. So, yeah. Like I say, guys, that amplification machine makes game so random and so fun. Like, this deck doesn't have room for a 12/12 8-mana creature if you want to keep its curve, right? But that you can just get anything from the amplification machine. So yeah, it's just kind of fun and wild, all the different things you can get. It keeps the games super fun and interesting. That is one thing that I'm really liking about this deck. It's really fun to play. It's really fun, just because so many crazy shenanigans can happen. It's actually got quite a few good different win ratios. I actually had one game where it was basically Rune Moth that won it for me. Rune Moth behind a Pyramid Warden that kept getting more and more runes of strength that I kept using on my Pyramid Warden to buff him up stronger and stronger. So it's got some interesting different combos of win conditions. Palace on his own could spit out a spell that absolutely ends worlds. Something like, oh, I don't know, Apocalypse Now, right? Palace could spit out Apocalypse Now or something really crazy. Anyway. So here, Shaped Blast will do 3 damage to every creature, but hey, when you got a 12/12 dragon on the board, 3 points of damage is just a scratch. That's all it is. It's just a tiny little scratch.
My followers bow to none.
And yeah, as you can see, we've turned this game around. We were coming from behind early on. He had the health lead, but thanks to Demogorgon, thanks to some of the roars from Amplification Machine, some Trial of the False Reflection shenanigans, some crazy stuff. We've totally turned things around, healed up entirely, which is cool for Magic to be able to heal up so effectively, right? But then again, thanks to Demogorgon. See you guys later.